Hi, everyone. I'm Sabrina, and I'm hoping that you're here for the panel about Japanese cafe and tea culture. We're correct on that? Yeah? All right. So first of all, I got to say, if any of you have been going to the other panels on this, I am having so much fun. So, thank you so much, all the Rose Foray people and everyone else who's been presenting today. It's been such a blast seeing everyone else. So now I've got a lot to live up to. Thanks. Thanks so much for that part, guys. So I just want to start with a little bit of information about myself. As I said, I'm Sabrina, and until 363 days ago, I've been living in Japan for about 10 years. 4 years of that was in Okayama, which is a tiny little place that's kind of a gateway to traveling through Japan because you have to go through it to get to southern Japan and Shikoku Island. You can't really go anywhere else in Japan without going through there. And then I moved to Osaka, which was when I really got seriously into Lolita. I'd been involved in Lolita since 2004. Got a little bit more serious when I moved to Japan in 2012. And then once I was in Osaka, Osaka is very, 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 very dangerous to be a Lolita in. You hear a lot about Harajuku. I feel like Osaka is worse because everything is right there. And so my wallet cried a lot. But it's also really, really good for learning about the cafe culture and being able to travel around a lot. So, and I am a major, major tea party addict. I lived in Scotland for a couple of years. I worked in a tea house here in Colorado for a while. And while I was in Japan, I got hooked on tea there. So I just thought, there's the way that Lolita events and like Lolita tea culture is in the States is very different from what it felt like in Japan. And from what I've heard, it's different in other parts of the world as well. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about what that's like. So I guess without further ado, let's go ahead and bring up the presentation. An introduction to brand and independent brand tea parties and events. Cue the dramatic music. All right, so a little bit about Japanese brand events, starting with the major brands. When I say this, I'm mostly talking about Angelic Pretty, Baby the Stars Shine Bright, and Innocent World. Metamorphose occasionally has events, but they are extremely, extremely rare. The entire time I was there, I think that between 2012 and 2022, I think there was maybe 2 events, one of which got canceled because it was supposed to be held in March 2020 for Midori's birthday, and got canceled for fairly obvious reasons. So Meta occasionally does events, but not very much. And most of the other big Lolita brands don't really do a lot of events. They just do their sales stuff. So it's really just those 3. And a lot of stuff is fairly similar to what we expect from brand tea parties. They're usually themed. The themes are a little bit stricter from what I've heard compared to the brand events that I'm used to outside of Japan. For example, the Angelic Pretty Alice in Wonderland themed tea party that I went to, they really, really went all in for it. I had a Red Queen themed coordinate that I thought was really cute. I had a little crown, I had a bright red outfit, I had some rose themed accessories, and then I showed up and we had scepters, we had full on like long wigs complete with book accurate headgear. It was very, very, very intense. So they really take it very seriously. There were illustrations from the books put up all over the walls. It was quite intense and really fun, but it made me actually feel like I was underdressed. Almost always the events are hosted by brand designers and managers, which is nice because it means you get to meet like all the legendary people behind this stuff. And of course you get a lot of guest models who are pretty famous. So you get to run into all the big ones, Misako, Midori, occasionally some of the new and up and coming models who you may or may not end up seeing later on. Foreign models occasionally will come over, but it's mostly the big Japanese models that will come in, and they're usually encouraged to stick around. So you'll get to have Q&As with them. Sometimes they'll be encouraged to sit at tables with the guests, although that really depends on the size of the event, the type of the event, and whether or not it was before 2020, but we'll get into more of that later. The biggest difference that I've noticed is the attitude towards photography. It's very, very, very discouraged at the Japanese events, and I'm not just talking in terms of avoiding photographing the models and avoiding photographing the new prints and things. Even taking photos of your friends and things, there's got to be in explicitly designated photo spots at specific times. And that does, I would have to agree with that. Jamie just said that it feels like you're living more in the moment, and it does. It makes it a lot, you feel a lot more present. You're not constantly distracted by things. There's a lot less Instagramming of your food choices, for example. But it also can be a little strange when you're like, I just want to get a picture with me and the people at my table, but then you've actually got to make sure you grab those people at your table before they all get in the elevator to leave at the specific time that you're supposed to be taking photos. So you get a chance to remember everything that happened, but getting documentation if you want photos of that sort of thing is a lot more difficult. But they do tend to be very photogenic areas, and they do have areas set aside specifically for that. And a lot of events will have photos with the guests as a kind of prize that you can get, either because you've won an award for being best dressed or something, or because you've bought a certain amount of, or pre-ordered a certain amount of merchandise. And by a certain amount, I mean, again, my wallet cried a lot while I was in Japan. See, coordinating Lolitas wasn't a challenging enough situation. Oh my gosh, yeah. Big same. And then the other thing is that main coordinate pieces must be brand. I feel like that's kind of an obvious thing. Like if you're going to an angelic pretty tea party, you should be wearing mostly angelic pretty pieces. But when I say that it must be brand, I mean you come in and you are wearing, let's say you've got an angelic pretty skirt and then a baby blouse, and they might say, no, you've either got to get on an AP Bolero or something on top of that, or you need to go and change it. I have not seen them outright refuse entry to people for stuff like that, but it has to be very clearly majority that brand. A lot of times, the Japanese Lolitas will challenge themselves to come entirely in brand coordinates, maybe a few off-brand or independent accessories, but a lot of them will refuse to wear anything that comes from any other major brand, which can be a challenge sometimes. But yeah, if you do not have at least a blouse and a JSK or an OP, a very, very large amount of your cord that's coming from that brand, they are very, very strict. Nari says, I've seen some modified AP pieces at tea parties. I'm kind of curious, modified in like seamstress altered or modified in another way? I'm kind of curious what you mean by that, because I'm curious. Oh, like photos. Jesus. Changing sleeves, adding stuff. There's one mercury. I think that those are allowed to be done. I think like modified pieces can be done, and like photos of things from the tea parties can be brought out. Again, they're usually designated photos, especially at the AP tea parties. They'll frequently have pieces that they're working on, that they're thinking about debuting, that they will encourage people to take photos of, or pieces that they have planned on releasing and they decided to not release for whatever reason, and they'll let people take photos of those pieces. And it's kind of a neat opportunity to see those. But yeah, those are always designated photo ones that they've said, yeah, we want photos of these to be released for whatever reason. I think I'm understanding what you're saying. You're not being confusing. Sorry, I'm probably misunderstanding stuff too. But I hope I'm kind of getting what you're saying. If not, I'm sorry. I'll move on here really quick to more specifics, because I've kind of gone on specific things. Angelic pretty tea parties. We'll start with that. They are pretty much always held in Tokyo. Occasionally they've been held in Osaka, like once every few years, but almost all of them will be held in Tokyo, usually on about a yearly basis. That didn't really happen during COVID for kind of obvious reasons, but since 2022, they've kind of resumed doing that yearly again. Sometimes they have them a little bit more often, but in general, it's just once a year. If they have it more often, it's usually because there's a big event, like when they had I don't remember which anniversary it was, but I want to say in 2019, it was maybe the 20th anniversary. They had an extra Angelic Pretty Memorial Museum event that was less a tea party and more an exhibition, but you still had to get tickets and you had the opportunity to see like an entire museum of AP pieces and meet models and designers again and ask them about all the different pieces and then enjoy snacks and a chance to pre-order new pieces at the end. So that was one of those special situations where they had more than one event. So yeah, generally just once a year. They are the largest Lolita brand events in Japan. That's some of the only events where they'll sell more than like double-digit tickets. You'll frequently get around 1 to 200 some tickets being sold for those. And so they're almost always held in fairly large event halls, hotels. You'll sometimes get smaller ones, but almost always there'll be triple-digit ticket sales. That said, even though anyone can get into those and they have the largest amount of ticket sales, you're usually only allowed to get a ticket for yourself and one other ticket. You can't get too many tickets for other people. And until COVID, in general, you had to go in person to get the tickets. They've opened it up more in recent years. They were starting to before COVID, and now it's a major thing where you can get them online, but you have to pick them up in person to kind of limit people just ordering them online under different aliases and emails. So it can be tricky to get them if you don't have a way to actually pick them up online. If you're not actually in the area and able to go in person, then it can be a little bit difficult to get them. And obviously they sell out very quickly. So you've got to be ready to pick them up. Baby. These ones, I have not actually been to a baby tea party because they do not hold them, like hardly at all. I've seen quite a few of them held overseas, but they don't hold a lot of baby tea parties in Japan, strangely enough. They hold them, even before COVID, they only held them like once a year at the most. In general, they only seem to hold them every like 2 or 3 years. And the location kind of varied. I'd say the most frequent location tended to be in Osaka, but you know, sometimes it'd be in Tokyo, sometimes it was in Nagoya, sometimes, I think once it was actually in Shikoku, which was kind of a weird location. They had it in Tokushima, which is not an easy place to get to. So they don't have a ton of them, and they tend to be in little awkward locations, but that does make them feel a little bit more special. They're a bit less about what you expect when you think about tea parties. Usually when you think about brand tea parties, you're thinking you sit down, you've got your tables with all your other Lolitas, you enjoy your tea, you enjoy your snacks, you have the fashion walk, you get your previews of the upcoming designs and prints that you might be getting to see. You get to hear a bit of the story behind where those prints came from, and then if you're lucky, you get photo sessions at the end after you do your pre-orders. The baby parties, from what I've heard from my friends who were lucky enough to get tickets, they are less about meeting the models and seeing the fashions in like a fashion walk style. They will preview the dresses, but they're more frequently on mannequins, or there will be fabric samples and sketch photos that they'll be passing around. Oh, thanks, Nari. And the designers do a lot more of the talking. It's more about how they come up with the designs of the dresses and less about the models, which I think is kind of quite interesting. The tickets are available to anyone, but they do have to be bought in person. You cannot get them online or via the phone or any other way. They have to be in person. You can only buy for yourself. And there's not a lot of them. They're almost always held in hotel tea rooms. So those tend to max out at like 50 tickets at the most in general. Now they're strict about their brand wearing requirements, but you know, since it's Baby, obviously Baby and Alice and the Pirates are both welcome as your cord base. And they're a little bit less strict than some of the other brands are about it. Like if you've got a Baby JSK, but you've got like an Innocent World blouse or something, they're going to be a lot less strict about it than some of the other brands are. So as long as your one main piece is clearly from the brand, they're probably going to be fine with it. Innocent World. Okay, this one's my favorite because I was lucky enough to be an Innocent World special member during COVID, and this was when the Innocent World tea parties kind of hit their high point. Because pre-2019, Innocent World didn't really do tea parties. They did events maybe once every 5 or 6 years. Fujiwara-san does not like being in the spotlight. She's kind of shy. She's one of the older Lolita designers, and she has said she feels like she's not what you think of when you think of a Lolita designer. So she didn't really like being in the spotlight so much. She felt like she was too tall, she was too old, all this other stuff. So she didn't really want to be in the spotlight much. But she did have a Christmas party shortly after I moved to Osaka that had, gosh, I think it sold 20 tickets. And that was a big enough success. She decided to have one for her birthday party. And I won't say how old she was turning, but that was a part of the big deal of it. She's like, I decided I need to tell people how old I am. Oh, I'm sorry, I just had a pet jump on my shoe. And after that, she decided, maybe she should be celebrating the fact that there's Lolitas of different types out there. There's different size Lolitas. There's taller Lolitas, shorter Lolitas. I can grab him, Jamie. He's very small if he will get on my hand, but he'll come up at some point. There's older Lolitas. There's Lolitas from all over the world. So during COVID, Innocent World actually started holding seasonal tea parties and events, and they're still holding them. They, even though their in-person stores have pretty much all closed down, which is sad, they have something like 4 or 5 events a year, and they have been for like the last 4 years, which is wonderful and really sad because I don't get to go to them anymore. So they, the other thing about Innocent World that I think is interesting is, in general, AP and Baby and Meta, when they do events, it's still pretty much just tea parties. You go, you get your drinks, you get your snacks, you have your fashion show or your discussion with the designers, and that's pretty much it. Innocent World does really intimate events and larger events. You'll have 50-plus person tea parties in hotels. You'll have fashion walks. During the height of COVID, they would literally have 20 people in a huge ballroom separated out by chairs. We were not allowed to talk. And we were not allowed to stand up and move unless they gave us approval. We had to text each other if we wanted to comment on stuff. But they would have these very elaborate fashion walks with Midori and Misako. And they still do those, but now you're allowed to talk and you can sit closer to people, thankfully. They have these really amazing events that I hope they continue doing, where you could go in groups of 1 to 3 people to the Innocent World Atelier, which is still there. You just can't go in except for these events where all the designers work, and they will have you come in, just that small group, and you will have Midori and Misako and Fujiwara-san, and they will actually give you a private look at all the upcoming pieces in all the colorways, some of their special pieces that they are getting ready to phase out or that they've found in their stockroom that they're trying to sell out. And you basically get like a private consultation with them on what they think you should buy, which is fantastic and very flattering and also a little high pressure. And they'll also have like holiday parties, like the Christmas party that I was telling you about, or birthday parties. They like to cultivate a very intimate atmosphere, which I think adds to the experience because it makes you feel like a very valued customer. The stores in Japan always tend to make you feel like you're a valid customer, and the Lolita stores in particular, they get to know you as you come in, and if you're part of the fashion, of course, whether they know you or not, they're just going to be thrilled to see you. But getting that one-on-one connection, even though you know that it's because you paid for a ticket, between the designers and the models, to the point where you're like, I have personalized photos with these guys. I have autographed photos with all of them. It just is one of those memories. You're like, this is amazing. I can keep these forever. It's very, very, very luxurious. The negative about these is the tickets are so difficult to get. They're so difficult to get. the shopping is it's very high pressure. The nice thing is that you get to go shopping because, as a lot of people have noticed, it's very difficult to get Innocent World products anymore. It's mostly because of these events. The tickets are super limited because Innocent World has their special member system, and what they do is special members always get first grab at these events. And it's not just they get the tickets in advance early. What you do is you buy the tickets, you submit them, you can buy them at any time that they are on sale, but you don't automatically get them when you purchase them. The people at Innocent World actually go through and look at the emails, and they see how many special members during the sale period have purchased them, even if they purchase them in the later part of the sale period, and the special members get priority. So special members will always get the tickets first. And if special members do not buy out all the tickets, then they will go in the order of the people who purchased them. So frequently the tickets end up getting sold out just to the special members, especially during COVID when there were like 10 to 20 tickets being sold at a time. It's a little bit easier to do them now, but then, that also means that the special members get first dibs at the dresses and the products, all of them. So sometimes those products completely sell out before they even get on the website for pre-order, which, is fantastic if you happen to be a special member or know a shopping service person who is a special member, but not so great if you don't. And that's a little bit unfair in some ways. And it can be, no, my headphone just fell out. It also adds to the pressure feeling like you have to buy something, because if you don't get it then, you might not get another chance. And I think now that things have loosened up a little bit with the pandemic and we can have different types of events again, and sales are starting to perk up a little bit more for Innocent World, because they really struggled during the pandemic. I think that they're able to loosen things up a bit, and so hopefully that high pressure environment has gone down a bit. Also, they have dropped their limits for the special prizes. So I think I mentioned before that you can get photos with models and designers sometimes depending on how much you spend on pre-orders during the events. And so, for example, this one that I was showing before, which was from, that was one of the Christmas one-on-one or two-on-two, I guess, modeling events. That was, you had to spend, I want to say the equivalent of about $800 to get that, which I did. Oops. But yeah, I think I got 2 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, and 4 hats. They were really nice hats. And, that was like the top thing that you could get. But, like depending on what you spend, you can get signed bromides, you can get a picture of you with one model, you can get a picture with both models, you can get one with all of them, you can get signatures, plus bromides, all this other stuff. Usually I wouldn't spend that much, but that was a really, really nice party. And they've sort of started dropping the limits on what you have to spend to get those, because all the same special members were coming, and they're like, well, but we don't really need the same bromide sets and the same photos over and over again. So, oh yeah, that's right. You can see the hats in the background, can't you? Yeah, you can see the hats in the back. They're fun. I have a hat addiction. It's very, very obvious. Yeah. The other really nice thing about the personal experience and bonuses with Innocent World 2 is when you get the opportunity to meet the people, frequently we'll be giving gifts to the models and the designers too. They'll collect gifts that they will then open while they're there. And of course, all these parties have like best dress awards and things, both Models' Choice, Designer's Choice, Overall Choice, things like that. Most of the other parties, most of the other brands, they will know who you are, but they won't, like they'll know who you are based off of your coordinate, but they won't remember you from event to event. The Innocent World people remember because the parties are so intimate. They will remember you. When the stores were open, they would remember you by name. I walked in after work one day in like my grubbiest, crappy post-elementary school music teacher clothes, and Fujiwara-san and Midori were in there. And I walked in there and immediately like, oh, Miss Sabrina, thank you. How are you? You look so lovely. I'm like, oh no. Hi, yes, I look like crap. Can I please just pick up my order and flee in embarrassment? So but it's nice to, kind of feel like you've actually got that connection with them. So if you ever do have the opportunity to go to a brand event in Japan and you have a way, if you can find a special member, please, please, please try and get into the Innocent World ones. As far as I'm concerned, they are 100% worth the time and effort to get into them. I can't, I have no idea how to say this. DB O'Air says it's impressive and nice, especially because I can't even remember who half my comm members are, and I've been around for some years. Yeah. Definitely, I definitely feel that. All right, moving on to overseas brand events. I want to have just a quick little discussion here about like how strict the themes are at events compared to Japan. Because I was mentioning before, they can be pretty strict about matching like the Alice in Wonderland theme, the Lily of the Valley theme, the print theme at some of the events. Like they're not going to ban you from entering, but the adherence for the Japanese Lolitas is pretty intense. And I wondered if any of the people who've been to events outside of Japan, is it that strict? I was under the impression it wasn't quite that strict, the ones that I've been to, but I also haven't been in the country for like 14 years overall between Scotland and Japan, so I don't know if things have changed. APT party we had here in Colorado was extremely lax. And I know that, like, there's not a ton of brand events held in the States either, are there? Like one every few years? Oh, geez, cosplaying. Oh, boy. Okay. So brand events in the Bay mostly just check that you're wearing the correct brand. Okay, so it seems a little bit more like it's less about like themes and just more about like meeting the people and attending the event. Oh no, horrible tea. Oh, that's tragic. And oh, that's nice. I brought my fiance with me, and he was not in AP. Oh, that's really nice that they let you bring in some people who aren't. They're pretty strict about who is and is not allowed in at the events. Even if you're bringing guests, they'd better be ticketed and with like in brand as well. So that's kind of nice. I would love to have brought my wife in a few times, but she doesn't really wear Lolita. So I wish that I had been able to go to one that they'd let her in. And my cons used to have them more often, not so much anymore, even pre-COVID. Tea party started a domino effect that led to the creation of Rosé Foray. Well, in that case, thank you to that terrible tea party. I definitely like that. And then another one I had is what level of interaction with special guests are there? Because I know there's not quite as many of the big name special guests from Japan at the non-Japanese events for obvious reasons, but I know that occasionally there are some there, and then there's local special guests. But I didn't know if there was the amount of interactions. Like at the Innocent World tea parties, we're literally having personal conversations with Midori and Misako and the brand people. And even at the bigger tea parties, you get to talk a bit with some of the people. So I'm not sure if there is a lot of, sorry, I'm cracking up at the Spite Fuels greatness conversation down here. I don't know if there's a lot of interaction with the guests. I'm guessing probably there is, but I don't know if it's just because it's more locally known people. I guess that goes along with the next question, which is how many famous models versus local, you know? That tea party was my first ever Lolita event, and probably why it took so long for me to get more into Lolitas is hopefully cost. Oh, yeah, that would not be a great way to get into Lolita. Oh no, hope that, yeah. That's tragic. That is a tragic start. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like actually that first question answered a lot of these. Well, I said it depends on the guest. Like Akira was very happy to talk, for example. That would have been fun. Jamie says there were only the AP USA shop girls at our tea party. But that still could have been interesting to hear from. We don't get to hear a lot from the shop girls at the Japanese ones. They're there. They just generally are more like the people taking the photos or making sure that we all get to our seats and that we're all actually ticketed and supposed to be there. So we don't get to interact with them super much. It would be kind of interesting to like hear, especially because they have to do a lot of importing stuff, don't they? So that would be interesting. I want to ask more questions, but I'm going to move on because I'm talking too much. Sorry. Independent brand events. Obviously, way more lax in the brand events. Like wearing brand is not required. It's good etiquette, but a lot of the indie brands that have events in Japan are more about accessories and things. Ooh, now you got to interact with the Triple Fortune people. Oh, I never got to go to Paradiso. I'm jealous of Nari now. Yeah, so at the indie brand ones in Japan, there's not a lot of indie clothing brands. There's some, but most of the ones that do events, they'll have clothing, but their emphasis is more on accessories. So wearing the brand is not required, but good etiquette. Like even at Royal Princess Alice tea parties and things, they like, yeah, if you want to wear an RPA dress, that's great, but you do not have to. It's just kind of considered good etiquette if you can, but they're more about actually just interacting with people. Much more personal experiences, not in the way that Innocent World is, where it's like you have the luxury of meeting everyone, but more like the models actually sit and hang out at your tables. You get to have a lot more just kind of casual chats with them. The designers will literally just like walk around and chill with you. And Bert, please stop climbing on my foot. If you want to climb up, you can. Just get up my leg. Fine. Okay. They have a lot more kind of themes as well. Like instead of just holidays and like Alice in Wonderland, flowers, etc., they'll have really odd themes. Like instead of just a cafe, it'll be like roller derby cafe or roller rink cafe, I guess would be a better one. Instead of Christmas, it will be Christmas in the Swiss Alps. And they'll have different, instead of just like a tea party, you'll have lots of different games. You'll have like there was a Never Have I Ever game thing that we did at one party for Dreaming Drop and Mercy Mel, where we all just had a thing where everybody would ask a question and people would raise their hand and we'd mark through, and in the end it was who all had done the most of the things that we all asked about, and then those people got prizes. It was fun, but it was not expected. And so it's kind of nice to get prizes beyond just best dress. If Rosé Foray does stuff like this for things, please do. That would be so much fun. I'm just noticing that like so many people were talking about other designers that they got to meet. That's so cool. And I know that there's a lot of indie events around Japan, mostly because there's a lot of venues. I don't know if there's a ton of them here in the States. I don't think that there's a lot in Europe from what I've heard, except for indie fashion brands, less about accessory brands, but a lot for the fashion brands. And so it'd be very interesting to find out, like, if now that there are more independent alternative fashion brands really gaining popularity in the States, if we're going to see more events like that. I would love to see more of those. Clearing my throat. High tea, crusty cafe, and kissaten culture. 3 very different things that sometimes get conflated with each other. Start with high tea in Japan, which is kind of what you would expect. I've got 3 different examples of high teas here. We have, you know, your kind of traditional, what you would imagine European, British style high tea, which is lovely and beautiful and quite expensive, but delicious. Now, Japan likes to theme their high teas a lot, not just in terms of the look, but in terms of the taste. You'll get, I went to a St. Patrick's Day high tea, for example, where not only was everything green, but everything was matcha and pistachio flavored, which was interesting. It was good, but it was very interesting because I was not expecting to have a tea sandwich where the bread was pistachio flavored. Ended up tasting great, but I was very surprised when I first bit into it. Obviously, you get like sakura themed ones. And then if you go to specialty teas in more established places like cinnamon roll cafes or other themed cafes, then you'll have things that are themed based off of the characters. But if you have limited teas, like the ones that they'll have in hotels and not in permanent tea, like tea specific locations, then yeah, you'll get some very, very interesting types of teas. A lot of those locations, like the hotels and places, will have buffet style teas, which is the one that I've got pictured up at the top there. Those are actually my favorite kind. They are not what you expect when you think of a fancy tea, but they still have that feel. Like you'll get your tea served at the table, and then you go and serve yourself your own little tea snacks, buffet style, but they are just as delicious, and you just kind of get to pick and choose which ones you like. And then once you sit down, it feels like you're having a high tea. You just get to serve yourself. And the themes for those are really, really fun. There was a peach and music one that I did. There was one that was actually Gothic and Lolita themed. It was a little bit more Gothic themed, but everything was like black and roses in terms of looks, and everything was dark chocolate and strawberry flavored and things. That was wonderful. And they had, oh yeah, my wife has just commented, logged in under my name, that she found that one for our anniversary. That was fun. Ooh, yeah, I've got that at the end actually, Nari, so recommendation list. So I'll try and rush through to that really quick. And then you'll have the more like, the final picture on the bottom is the more sort of Japanese style high teas, where it's still Western style high tea themed, but the snacks are more Japanesey. So you have more wafuku Japanese sweets and more Japanese teas, but presented in a Western style. Kissatens. So if you've taken Japanese or you've studied a lot about Japan, you'll see a lot of people talking about kissatens and say that that is the word for coffee house or cafe, which it is, but Japanese kissatens are not really what we think of when we think of coffee houses or cafes. You can see here they're a little bit more like, I guess it would be a little bit more sterile. They look a little bit kind of like cafeterias. They're nice, like the people there are great, but it's more of a place where you go and just get your thing to eat and drink and kind of relax for a few minutes and leave. It's not really a place that you would settle down and have a meeting with friends at, or have a long leisurely relaxing time at. So just fair warning, like they're lovely places to go and hang out at, but not really like a place that you would want to go if you were in Japan and planning on a Lolita meet or meeting up with friends in Lolita. I would just avoid kissatens in that way. Crusty cafes, on the other hand, sometimes these will be kissatens, sometimes they will be Western style cafes. Basically, crust is hard to define. The best way I can define it is they will almost always be run by a stereotypical little Japanese oji-chan or oba-chan who you'll walk in and they'll immediately be like, oh yes, hello, hello. Do you speak Japanese? I want to practice English. Yes, please enjoy. Delicious. What do you like about Japan? Do you want candy? Kind of thing. And the teaware will almost always be mismatched. There will very frequently be a distinct lack of any kind of decent lighting. Sometimes it'll smell like smoke, even if it's non-smoking, and it will look like the grossest place and also the cutest place at the same time. And crust hunting is kind of one of the best parts of being a Lolita in Japan. It's just walking around and looking for these weird little places where they will never be able to meet your dietary needs, and they will only have like 5 things on their menu, and it will look like the creepiest, sketchiest cafe ever. And then you go in there and you're like, this is the best experience ever. I'm just going to sit in here and listen to the ancient jazz and Showa pop music and enka stuff and just drink tea out of this teacup that is on a plate that looks like it came from a kid's store, and eat this sandwich that I have no idea what's in it, and just relax and talk with the old ladies here while me and my friends just relax. And it's so much fun. So it doesn't look like it would be very aesthetic, but it is a blast, especially if you like doing more classic and old school Lolita, it's so much fun. So give crust hunting a try. And that brings us to a little bit about just the pros and cons of high tea in Japan. Crusty cafes are the cheapest things that you're going to get to do. But if you want to do the high tea stuff, which is going to be the best way to go to tea in Japan, I talked about the fantastic themes. Again, you'll get things like music, peaches. You'll obviously get things like Alice in Wonderland and character cafes, but you'll also occasionally get things like Osaka. I went to a temporary high tea that was themed around old school Osaka, like the weirdest parts of Osaka, complete with octopus themed stuff, which was wonderful. You get so many choices, not just hundreds of types of tea, and they will let you change tea and refill it as much as you want to within your time limit. The flavors, the locations, they will be everywhere. No matter where you are in Japan, there will be a high tea near you at some point. They happen constantly. They will constantly be changing over. If you do not like what is being served at your regular high tea place, you go to a hotel, it will be rotating on almost a monthly basis. Just tons of it. Lots of price differences. There's a lot. The atmosphere is fantastic because you get premium service. You get exactly what you'd expect when you're paying for. They're all aesthetic as hell. Like it's just fantastic atmosphere, and they pretty much all will allow and encourage photography as long as you're not bothering other guests. And the wait staff will always offer to take your photos, and especially if it's a cafe that is established and not just a temporary one. So like a permanent character cafe or a permanent tea house will have spaces set aside specifically for you to take photos, and people will not give you any hassle there. So that is really, really nice if you are fully dressed up and want to get that done. The lows of high tea, they are not cheap, especially if it is a temporary one. You might be able to get lower costs if you go to a permanent cafe, but the temporary ones very rarely run less than about $40 for 90 minutes max. And they're usually closer to an hour. Even the long-standing, like permanent, this is just for high tea houses, you're still looking at about $30 for tea and some fairly small amounts of food. They're aesthetic, but it can run up. It can really run up your wallet if you're going constantly. If you don't speak Japanese, it can be really hard to book specialty teas. Regular tea houses you can just walk into, but the specialty ones you have to book online. You can't just call and book them. You generally have to book them online, and that can be a really tricky process, especially if you have to go and pay through a convenience store ATM, which you don't need like a Japanese card to pay through or anything, but you have to know how to navigate them, and then you have to go and pay up there, and then you have to figure out how you're going to print out the tickets, and it's a bit of math. Jamie says that's pretty typical for US high tea too. Oh, okay. Things got expensive. I am still clearly very out of date here. Strict time limits. I don't know. I've done a couple high teas since I came back here, and I know they've had time limits, but they've been a little bit more lax about it. Like once everyone's there, they've sort of started the time limits from what I've seen, and they've been a little bit more lax. Like, okay, you have this much time left. All right, technically your time is up, so can you guys wrap it up? And cool. All right, cool. You guys are paying within your time limit, but we're not going to give you a lot of hassle. In Japan, your time starts when your time starts. If your whole party is not there, then it doesn't matter. They will sit you down. They won't sit you until your whole party is there, but they start taking down that time right away, and you are out. Whether you could be in the middle of eating, you could be in the middle of taking a photo, and you could be in the bathroom, and you'll come back and they'll be like, "We've cleared your table. You got to go." So they're rigorously strict about the time limits. I'm seeing several people say that there's some stricter stuff in downtown areas and places with designated seating times. So yeah, I suppose yeah, in some areas where it's busier, it must be stricter. It's like this even in like the really countryside places in Japan though, which is a little distressing. So yeah, if you have trouble being on time, which I feel like is how many Lolitas? Like raise your hand back home if you are not on time because you're too busy getting your coordinates together. don't be assume that you need to be half an hour early in Japan. The gaijin stare. This is pretty so Lolita standard. Sorry, I like that. The gaijin stare. Fairly self-explanatory. You will get stared at. Even if it's a place where you're allowed to have photos taken, you'll just notice people just staring at you. You could be just sitting there drinking tea quietly with your friends, not even talking, and you'll just have the and that's awkward. That can be very awkward. Sometimes the people are nice, and sometimes you can tell they're not. So that can be unpleasant if you do not like having people just hyper focused on you, especially if you can tell that it's in a negative way. And if you're okay with that, it's not a problem. I was mostly okay with it. I had friends who really were not. Also, frequently they will try and take pictures without your permission. Luckily, usually the staff will discourage that. And so if anyone in Japan at any point in time is trying to take your photo without permission, just this. They will stop. It's the easiest way to do it. Just do that. They seem to think if you are not Japanese, they think it's okay. You don't have to put up with that. And the last negative is the food restrictions. It is really hard to get them to change anything if you have food restrictions. I have a lot of very weird food restrictions. The easiest one to accommodate is that I don't eat pork. Usually I'll just pick off the pork from things, but sometimes I'll tell them outright, it's like, I need a vegetarian option because it's easier. And they'll bring it out and say, okay, but there's still pork on this. Yeah, pork isn't meat. So that it's hard to communicate dietary restrictions. So if you have any really strict dietary restrictions, you might just have to potentially do without or go to places that are more used to foreign customers in Japan. Then I suggest taking photos back. I like that. Yeah, in Japan, pork is a vegetable. Pork is, it grows. It's a root vegetable. It grows in the mud, didn't you know? All right, this is the part that everyone wants, recommendations. I'm going to start in Nagoya, and I really had to cut this list down. I'm just going to start with my personal favorites, basically, and the ones that I think are most aesthetic. Nagoya, I'm starting with a place that is not really a cafe, but it's wonderful. It's called London Cupcakes. And I'm starting with this one because even though Nagoya is not a popular spot, it has a lot of really, really awesome Lolita places to go. And it's just a fun little kind of out of the way area. And the whole place is done up to look like a London flat, like a proper terrace house, as you can kind of see from this. They have it. Cupcakes in Japan are what I call Lolita muffins, which means they look fantastic. They don't always necessarily taste well. But this place is like authentic, good cupcakes that look amazing and also taste wonderful. So proper Lolita cupcakes. And so this is a great place to stop because you'll get great tea. You'll also get wonderful cupcakes. Moving to Tokyo, which is where I figure most people go. Q-Pot is the obvious one. All the Lolitas have to go to Q-Pot Cafe. It's in Omotesando, which is technically in Shibuya, but it's close enough to Harajuku that it's very easy to get to. Q-Pot is magnificent. I actually could not find a decent picture of Q-Pot. This was the one that showed me the most of it. There's a cheese corner, there's a chocolate corner, there's an entire upstairs area that is set up with mushrooms and bookshelves and all sorts of stuff that is just for taking photos. And if you go to my Instagram, which they've linked in the comments up here, any photo where I am leaning on a table or inside of a little like tableside theater thing or against a bookshelf, that is a Q-Pot. If I am by a cow, then that is a Q-Pot. It is incredibly aesthetic. It has amazing food. It has remarkably reasonably priced teas and high tea sets. They're always themed. This is like the Lolita Holy Grail in Japan. You must do Q-Pot if you can. And it is very easy to reserve space for that. So highly recommend that one. And then you can walk to Harajuku and do the full La Forêt experience. Other place where you can check out a lot of great cafes in Tokyo, because there's a million that you could recommend. Obviously, Harajuku and Shinjuku and Shibuya are all great spaces. I would also suggest going to the Jiugaoka area. And my favorite cafe there is the TWG Cafe. TWG is just a great brand of tea, but their cafe in Jiugaoka, you can see it's a lovely little place, but the service is amazing. What they give you for food is fantastic. And it is, you get a chance to sample any number of teas as well while you're there, which is a great bonus. And then you get to walk around one of the cutest little neighborhoods in Tokyo that no one ever goes to because it doesn't have all the shopping stuff. But it's really, really cute, and there's all these little places that you can go and eat, and I love it. And then Laderie, which it wouldn't let me put an accent on it because I don't know how to type on this computer. There are 2 Laderie cafes in Tokyo. The one that I think is prettier is the one in Ginza. There's also one in Shinjuku. There's one in Fukuoka down south as well, and one in Kyoto. And I'm pretty sure there's a couple Laderie locations here in the States as well. I know there's one in China. There used to be one in Taiwan, but it wasn't there when I went, so I was mad. They used to have 2 in Kyoto, and I would have highlighted those specifically, except that the one I really liked closed down like a couple months ago, and that one was great because it was Laderie macarons and tea, but also Japanese style. And that one was amazing, and then they closed it down, and I'm so mad about that. But any Laderie that you go to is great, and if you're going to go to the one in Tokyo, go to the one in Ginza, because as you can see, it is beautiful. And if you are not going to go to one in Tokyo, if you're going to go down south, you can hit the one in Fukuoka. If you want to go to Kyoto, there's a beautiful one there, and it's wonderful. Oh, the one in Washington, D.C. doesn't have good service? That would feel very French, especially, in America. The ones in Japan have good service, but I feel like that's just the way it is. I'm sorry, I have to pause for a second because somehow my bird has gotten underneath my dress and get out of my petticoat. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There was something climbing around in my leg there, and that was, I don't know when he got under there. But why were you under there? All right, back to recommendations. Yeah, at least I knew what it was, but it was very uncomfortable because you're slowly going up my belly. Since we're talking laundry, Kiki is the most Lolita accessory, but why are you under there? You don't like it under there. Oh my gosh, this comment. Okay. Back to Kyoto. Lots and lots of good cafes in Kyoto, but this one here is my personal favorite, Cafe Cherish. Mostly because it looks so weird. It's another one that's hard to get a good photo of, but as you can see, like, it's both gorgeous and also like incredibly creepy looking at the same time. There's so many dead trees and skulls hanging around this place, and also beautiful flowers, and it's so pretty. And the bird's trying to climb under my skirt again. Okay, I give up, bird. I give up. You're going on my head. It's a really, really, really nice cafe, and the service at this place is wonderful. It's probably, the service at Cafe Cherish is one of the best places that I've ever had, like, service wise. It's a little hard to get to, but it gives you a chance to explore a lot of Kyoto properly, which I love. So this is my favorite of the cafes that you can go to in Kyoto now that the Laderie proper Kyoto style one has closed down. Sticking with Kansai, we move to Kobe here, and this is Tea Room, and I assume that's how it's pronounced. I've actually never heard it said. But, this is another one that's hard to photograph because there's a whole other room in it off to the side that is a little bit more traditional tea room looking, but I love that it looks like macaron. This is another one that has a lot of designated photo spots in it. They serve all of their food in cages, so this is part of the reason I like it. It's located in Kobe, like right in downtown too. So usually what would happen is my friends and I would go and do shopping service stuff at Angelic Pretty Sannomiya, and then we'd go walking over to like 2 blocks to Tea Room, and we get our food and have a great time. It'd be wonderful. It'd be delicious. It would be fairly inexpensive, for the high tea, the individual sets were expensive, but the general afternoon high tea was fairly affordable. And you got full pieces of cake, not Japanese sized pieces of cake that are like that big. You got like proper sizes of cake. That was great. And then Osaka, which as far as I'm concerned is the holy grail for Lolita cafes because there's so many of them. Kitahama Retro is one of the more famous ones. The drawback to that is that it's always very crowded and kind of loud, but it's got great food. There will always be a ton of Lolitas there. It is probably the easiest to find, and it's very good at meeting your dietary needs too. This is one of the cafes that's used to having a lot of foreigners come in, so they're pretty good at understanding if you need something that's gluten-free or meat-free, or if it's a fairly common food restriction, they're pretty good about it. Three Chimneys is a really nice one, especially if you have a larger event, if you're going to be going with a lot of people, or if you want to meet up with a big group of Japanese Lolitas. There's a huge Lolita community in Kansai where the Japanese Lolitas and the international Lolitas will regularly meet up. It's a little bit like in Tokyo, the foreign Lolitas and the Japanese Lolitas are a little bit more separated, and in Kansai it's a bit more combined, I guess because it's a slightly smaller city. But Three Chimneys is one of the places that's really good for big parties because it's huge. It's about 3 times the size of the room that's here. And they have smaller high teas, but their individual menus are huge. The cake is huge. They don't have strict time limit. Usually, I think their high tea reservations are 2 hours, which is nice. And they generally don't kick you out as much as the other places. And then my favorite, which again, you will see a lot if you go to my Instagram, is Old Rose Garden. This is my absolute favorite tea place in Japan. I miss it so much. I was there like at least once a month, if not more. It was the best price. It, like, you would pay, I think it was $35 for their afternoon tea, and you got massive sandwiches. You got to pick out their cakes that were freshly made that day, and again, proper cake sizes, scones with actual Devonshire cream and not just whipped cream, fresh jam. Decent listening to dietary restrictions. They really tried. And amazing service. It's just photogenic as crazy. It's so hard to find because it's downstairs. You have to like go into this little neighborhood that looks like there's nothing there, and then you have to go down a flight of stairs. Once you find the sign and you don't realize it's there and it plays music that sounds like it came out of a Western, once you're down there, it's like you've walked into another world. It is beautiful. The food is delicious. The tea is amazing. The people are incredibly friendly. And also, it's like decorated with, you have like Paddington Bear and Benjamin Bunny and Peter Rabbit are everywhere. And all of these old, they have like a bunch of Precious Moments figures. The decorating is to die for. And I miss it. I miss it so much. It was the best place to go. There's a million other places that I could recommend, but if you ever make it to Osaka, as far as I'm concerned, this is like the must go place. If you go nowhere else, I would like skip Amemura, skip all the Lolita shops, skip Universal Studios, skip downtown, skip everything, go here. This is the place. You can waste hours there, and the staff will just treat you magnificently, and you'll have the best tea and just such a great time. I love it. Tasha Tudor. I don't think I've come across those books. That's what I'm going to write down now. Right. I know I technically only have like a minute left, but questions. I talked a lot. I had a little like ending slide, but that's, so yeah, that was the end of the presentation. But if anyone has like questions or anything, or wants to demand to know why my bird decided it was a great idea to climb underneath my dress in the middle of the presentation. Jamie says, what do I miss about living in Japan? I mean, it's been almost exactly a year since I moved back now, so I'm starting to get to the point where I'm missing stuff a lot. I think the 2 biggest things that I'm missing are the convenience stores just being everywhere, just being able to come across little shops anywhere that I'm going, whether I'm in a residential area or somewhere else. There's always going to be at least a convenience store that I can go to. And yeah, probably all the different little like pop-up events, the pop-up teas, the pop-up shopping events, the little fairs that'll pop up at different department stores for just like a day or two, and then they'll be gone. I really miss those a lot. Also, my friends. I've got great friends here. But I'm starting to miss my friends there a lot. We get to talk, but it's been a year now. I'm like, I want to see you. So I'm really glad my friends here are willing to put up with me because I'm being very needy lately. Posted a link to Tasha Taylor. I will have to find that. I can do that. I can Google it. Yes, Chi Chi. Yes, you're beeping. He's not talking. He's just dancing at me. The Chi Chi Airport story. Oh gosh. Which one? The one where the story of trying to pick him up? The story of importing the most expensive bird in existence? Oh, yeah, I'm so glad that people are finding this interesting and helpful. Yeah, I wish I'd known about some of these places when I was coming over here and when I was going over there. And I'd known like some of the differences between tea parties because like I wanted to go to some and then I showed up and I was like, oh wow, these are a lot stricter than I realized they were going to be. Also, there's a lot more going on here. Wow, I should have brought more money to this particular event. Chichi Airport story. Short version of the Chichi Airport story. This bird cost me so much money to get here because he came from Japan. And so we had to go through, we had to go straight to JFK because that was the only port we could import him through. Left him there for 30 days. He was supposed to come back through DIA, like straight through. And then I got a phone call the day before he was supposed to arrive after quarantine dropped him off. And he got a phone call from JFK going, so he's here, but there's not going to be anyone at Denver International Airport to pick him up, so we need to send him back to quarantine. We can't send him back to quarantine. He's been put out of quarantine. So what do we do? So I called the person who's done the organizing. She basically chewed them out and made them send him to Seattle and board him at a fancy pet hotel at their expense. And then they sent him over 2 days later. And we picked him up, and he was extremely happy to be back. Short version of it. Yeah, definitely bring double the expected money when you come to Japan. You will spend way more than you think you will. On things that you don't expect. Transportation, not as much. Food, not as much as you would expect. But then things like phones and like drinks and stuff, yeah, a lot. This is an extremely traveled bird. He has lived in 3 cities in 2 different continents in like a year and a half. I should probably let people take a break before the next panel, but thank you all so much for letting me talk and ramble for a while. And thank you again to the Rose Foray people. If you have any additional questions or just want to chat, Instagram at Jupiter Star Child is probably the best way to reach out for me. And I also apparently now have a Twitch account, which is also Jupiter Star Child. But probably Instagram is going to be the best way to find me. Thank you guys so much. And